I never set out to ruin anyone's life, but that fateful night, as I sat in front of my laptop with the dim light flickering against the wall, the temptation loomed larger than life. I found myself staring at my English teacher's online account, the very account that had control over my academic fate. It was the end of my sophomore year, and despite my best efforts, my grades were slipping into territory I never imagined I'd face. There were various factors contributing to my decline. My father's unexpected layoff had thrown my household into chaos, and it felt as if every ounce of stability was crumbling around me. I had always been a diligent student, never once worried about failing. But the thought of ending up with a failing grade in an already difficult subject made my stomach churn. I could picture my parents' disappointment, especially my dad, who had always believed in my potential. He dreamed of me getting into a great college, a dream that now seemed to slip further out of reach. As the pressure mounted, I noticed that my teacher, Ms. Collins, had been particularly hard on me lately, marking down my essays for minor mistakes and offering less encouragement than before. It felt personal, and after a disappointing grade on my latest paper, I thought about how futile it was to keep trying. In a moment of frustration, I recalled hearing from a friend about a simple vulnerability in our school's online system that allowed access to faculty accounts. I'd never been the type to break rules, but the idea began to seep into my thoughts, whispering promises of relief. After tossing and turning for days, the doubt turned to resolve. That evening, as I sat down to research how to disable my teacher's account, I felt an odd mixture of excitement and dread coursing through me. It was almost like a game, except the stakes were my future. The process itself was surprisingly straightforward. I kept reminding myself that this wasn't just about my laziness, it was about unfortunate circumstances. With every click, I felt my ethical boundaries shift a little further. Just this once, I whispered to myself, the words barely escaping my lips as I braced for the fallout. It took less than 10 minutes to find the right settings and disable Ms. Collins's account. The immediate rush felt exhilarating, a wildly irresponsible thrill that coursed through me, but that euphoria was quickly dampened by the weight of the decision I had just made. Days passed, and I experienced a strange sense of relief in my classes. I knew my work would go unnoticed, and I could relax without the suffocating fear of failure hanging over my head. But guilt began to gnaw at me. My classmates' confusion when Ms. Collins was absent only added to the tension. They had no idea that I was at the center of it all, the anonymous puppet master pulling strings in the shadows. Each passing day felt like a mini eternity, the relief once felt now shrouded in shame. Driving home from school one day, I caught a glimpse of my father's hopeful face reflecting on the rearview mirror. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him, and the guilt continued to twist deeper into my subconscious. As I turned onto our street, an unsettling thought surfaced: what if someone found out? The implications began to feel real as I lay awake at night, replaying the moment of my decision over and over. Had I really thought this through? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an abyss, ready to fall at any moment. And then, a call came through my phone one afternoon, a notification from the school board announcing Ms. Collins's unexpected absence due to health reasons, a shock that hit me like a punch to the gut. The mutual blame grew across the students, as they speculated on the cause of her absence. It felt like I was walking in a house of cards, and I had just blown a breath of wind that could bring the whole thing crashing down. Eventually, I chose to come clean. Sitting in front of a blank document hours later, I laid out everything: the pressure, the guilt, and most importantly, the fear of failure that had driven my reckless decision. It felt liberating, this carved-out confession, although I still trembled at what could come next. I sent it directly to Ms. Collins's school email, unsure of how she would react but hoping for understanding rather than punishment. A few days later, I received a reply that wasn't quite what I expected. Ms. Collins thanked me for my honesty, acknowledging the pressures students face and promising to support me rather than punish me. That day, I learned an invaluable lesson about integrity, resilience, and the shared burden of expectations. Feeling incredibly relieved, I stepped into my final exams with a motivation I had previously lacked. I didn't get perfect scores, but I didn't fail either. I learned that sometimes, the weight of our decisions can lead to unexpected revelations and growth. Reflecting on that period of my life, I still get chills when I think about how close I came to crossing a line I would never have been able to return from. To this day, I carry that lesson with me: honesty, integrity, and vulnerability can guide us through even the darkest decisions. Update: a few months later, Ms. Collins and I were paired at a school event, and she brought it up with a smile, acknowledging that my story had encouraged her to open conversations about mental health and pressure with her students. It felt surreal to laugh with her about it, and I understood that every choice matters, rippling across our lives in ways we sometimes can't predict. As I stood there, reminiscing about that surreal evening with Ms. Collins at the school event, a comforting warmth washed over me, stitching together the fragmented pieces of a time when my decision felt like a life or death situation. It was hard to believe that only months ago, I was a desperate teenager, standing on the precipice of failure, feeling invisible under the glaring fluorescent lights of a classroom that echoed with tension and judgment. That year had been a turbulent tide of anxiety and overwhelming expectations, where every test felt like an inescapable wave threatening to crash down on me. I remember how Ms. Collins, with her understated elegance and an ever-watchful eye, often noticed the tremors in our voices during presentations or the way we shuffled nervously in our seats during exams. But what struck me most about her was her passion for making the curriculum engaging, using humor and relatable stories to connect with her students. Somehow, this made the pressure feel even heavier. I didn't just want to meet her standards, I wanted to impress her. When I confronted that moment of vulnerability, the line between device and desperation blurred into that fateful choice. Disabling her account felt like both an act of defiance and a moment of deep betrayal. Yet, the weight of my subsequent guilt transformed into lessons I gradually started to share with my peers about honesty and transparency. After the event, our conversation meandered into deeper territories as we both reflected on how life decisions ripple outwards, subtly shaping the landscapes of our lives in ways we seldom acknowledge. Ms. Collins talked about her experiences, her own struggles with balancing expectations and reality, recounting how she had once been a high-achieving student too, feeling the suffocating pressure of attaining perfection. I listened, enraptured, realizing that behind her authoritative presence was a human being grappling with the same battles we all faced. That evening stands out in my memory more for its laughter than its tension. As we navigated the ebb and flow of our conversation, I felt an indescribable bond forming, one that transcended the boundaries of teacher and student. We were fellow travelers on this winding path of life, taking turns to share our stories, really listening to each other. Eventually, as the event wound down and we dispersed into the night, I walked away with a profound sense of closure and clarity about choices, acknowledging that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives don't define us. What truly matters is how we choose to learn from them and connect with others in the aftermath. Reflecting back now, I see how that incident influenced not just Ms. Collins but the entire class. More students began to speak up, sharing their stress and feeling validated in their struggles. It was a ripple effect, her candid acknowledgement empowering others to be open about their mental health challenges. I took pride in knowing my small act of sabotage had inadvertently sparked a larger conversation about self-worth beyond grades, transforming a potentially divisive moment into a collaborative effort to redefine success. As for me, I embraced my initial fear and shifted it into motivation, becoming an advocate within my school for discussions around mental health awareness, learning how to navigate the murky waters of failure alongside determination. I came to realize that growth isn't linear and that sometimes, we stumble into unexpected openings that allow for healing. And as time goes on, I can't help but wonder how many other stories are interwoven with ours, caught in the web of choices, redemption, and connection, forever rippling across the tapestry of our lives. It reminds me that every action, no matter how small, has its role, be it enlightening or obscure, and leaves an imprint on the heart. After all, we're all just trying to find our way, aren't we? Life continued to unfold in unpredictable ways after that fateful encounter with Ms. Collins at the school event. I found myself reflecting not only on my own journey but also on the lives of my classmates, each of us grappling with our own unique pressures. Every conversation seemed to dance with unspoken stories beneath the surface. I would watch as students shared their ambitions and anxieties, forming delicate threads connecting their aspirations, fears, and the instinctual desire to find safety in numbers. We had all learned to wear our facades, often presenting an image of confidence while battling doubts that gnawed at our insides. The pressure to excel remained heavy, cloaking our days like a fog that never fully lifted. Yet, something began to shift in me. As I grew closer to my peers, I learned snippets of their struggles. Some faced obstacles far greater than my fleeting brush with desperation. A classmate of mine, Jake, had been dealing with the ramifications of a home environment suffused with discord. Another, Sarah, was burdened by the weight of her family's expectations, contemplating medical school while harboring a passion for art. These revelations fostered a sense of camaraderie that seemed to weave us together like a vibrant tapestry. I felt compelled to create a safe space where, perhaps for a moment, we could shed our masks and be vulnerable. So, I organized a small gathering at my house one rainy Friday evening, inviting a few close friends over for a night of games and sharing, without the pressure of grades or judgment looming over us. The air was thick with laughter and the rich aroma of popcorn as we played ridiculous party games and debated who would win in a battle between superheroes. But as the night progressed, I steered the conversation to a quieter course, gently encouraging everyone to share something meaningful. Much to my surprise, the mood shifted from playful banter to genuine revelations. Secrets spilled forth like a release valve. I listened to Jake as he recounted moments of feeling trapped at home, how school felt like both a refuge and a battleground. Sarah opened up about the crushing weight of expectations, sharing her dreams of pursuing art that felt so beyond her family's understanding. As I shared my own story, the absurdity and depth of my decision to hack into Ms. Collins' account, the warmth of acceptance settled over us, binding us closer as we embraced each other's truths. That evening felt magical. It was as if we were stitching new seams into our lives, allowing ourselves to be imperfect and whole in the same breath. Days turned into weeks, and our small gatherings morphed into regular meetings, where we'd share laughter intermingled with vulnerability, creating an environment ripe for growth and support. There was something beautifully comforting in knowing that we each held space for one another. Conversations about our dreams and strategies on how to navigate the murky waters of life filled the air, insignificant moments transformed into significant lessons, the ripples of which spread far beyond our cozy circle. The bonds we forged became an unspoken agreement. We would lift each other up through challenges, remind one another that vulnerability is strength, and dissect the chaos of high school together. By the time graduation approached, I could see the change in my friends. Their faces bore a certain glow, a confidence they hadn't possessed before. We were stepping into new chapters, but whatever uncertainties lay ahead, we now had this constellation of support that sparked the courage to tackle life's unpredictability. On the last day of school, standing outside the building one last time, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the connections we had created. As we hugged, snapped countless pictures, and made promises to stay in touch, I was hit with a profound sense of closure. I knew that the ripples of our choices had tangled beautifully. We were no longer just individuals lost in the struggles of adolescence. We were a group, connected by experiences that molded us into who we had become. In the quiet corners of my mind, I reflected on Ms. Collins and the impact of that one fateful decision. She had not only inspired me to be honest in my struggles but had also unknowingly set off a chain reaction that taught so many of us the value of openness and connection. As we prepared to step into the future, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe for the divine messiness of our intertwining lives and the lessons that inevitably came from forging connections, even in the most unexpected and challenging of circumstances. After all, we're all just navigating uncharted waters, aren't we? I still remember the moment my life shifted when I was 15. The air thick with a mix of excitement and dread as I sat on my bed, my phone cradled in my hands. It felt like just another silly decision, one that all my friends were making, a way to feel grown up and wanted at an age when I struggled to understand what that even meant. I was never popular, not in the way that seemed to matter, but I had found a little corner of attention with someone who made me feel special. Alex was charming in a way that made him seem wise beyond his years, and when he began complimenting me, I felt like I was walking on air, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in my heart. I was excited yet scared. The weight of the secret I held seemed unbearable. I had told my best friend, Mia, hoping for something resembling reassurance, but she let out a soft gasp that made my chest tighten. "You sure you want to do that?" she asked quietly, her eyes wide. I shrugged, trying to dismiss her concerns but deep down wondering if I was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Then there was the night, the restless hours stretching endlessly until I finally succumbed to the impulsive thought that had gnawed at me for days. My heart raced as I positioned my phone, the soft glow of the screen lighting up the room, casting shadows that danced along the walls. The words on my screen felt heavy with meaning. I typed, hesitated, then clicked send, each second feeling like eternity. It turned out Alex was everything I thought he was but more, too. He was charming, but that charm concealed a genuinely toxic nature. The thrill of that connection quickly morphed into a sharp realization of the vulnerability I had exposed myself to. Within days, I lost my grip on a sense of safety that is naive in a world of sharp edges. The photos I had sent, intended to be a secret shared between two kids playing at adulthood, became fodder for a cruel game I never agreed to participate in when he decided to share them with his friends. I learned about it the hard way when I heard laughter echoing in the school hallways, each cruel giggle a dagger deep in my chest. They didn't call me by my name, I was simply that girl. The humiliation ballooned, each passing day a relentless storm of anxiety and shame that followed me home, invading every thought and every interaction. I'd lock myself in the bathroom, staring at the reflection of someone who felt like a stranger, questioning how I could have made such a grave error in judgment. The betrayal cut deeper than the ridicule, a twisted urge to make everyone understand that I was just a kid, lost in the whirlpool of teenage insecurities yet so desperate for validation. As the weeks faded into months, I became a ghost in my own life, a faceless figure drifting through a crowd that once felt like home. I wish I could say that I found a way to reclaim my narrative, that I could fight back and tell Alex exactly how he had wronged me, but silence was my only armor, a shield against the resurgence of hurt. Miraculously, things began to shift. I sought the unwavering comfort from Mia. She gently held my hand through the worst of it, her support a reminder that there were still people who saw me as I was and not as a caricature of someone's cruelty. The heart-wrenching experience drew some of my former friends closer while severing ties with daylight friendships that had dulled in their sincerity. Through Mia and other steadfast souls, I found resilience, learned how to vocalize my hurt, and little by little, the bravery burrowed deep within me began to bloom outwardly. It was easy to lose sight of myself in the cacophony of whispers, but I recollected the fragments of my identity, and it became apparent, my worth was no longer tied to someone else's decisions. When I finally got the courage to confront Alex months later, there was an unexpected calmness in my heart. I walked up to him, ready to finally speak what had knotted in my throat for so long. I told him how he had diminished my world, how I had trusted him and how he betrayed that trust in the most irrevocable way. What I expected, perhaps, was a reaction, anger or dismissal or maybe even a hint of remorse. Instead, he shrugged and said, "Why did you even care? It was just a picture." Those words cut deeper than anything. It solidified for me that he was consumed by his own ego, blind to the pain he caused. In contrast, I experienced the bittersweet release of standing firm, of confronting my past, and ultimately letting go. It was there and then that I understood, through those harrowing months, I had learned for myself what real strength looked like. Looking back now, as an adult, I find myself grappling with that scarred chapter of my youth, considering it a cautionary tale rather than a source of shame. I began to share my story in platforms where others might find a reflection of healing in it. I created a small forum where young people could talk about the pressures they face, harnessing pain to build resilience and community. Updates often come flooding in from those who once bore the weight of similar burdens, each message a reminder that while the past can be a formidable beast, it also has the power to bind us together in our shared experiences. In a way, it fostered a sense of empathy that had me see each person, not as a label, but as a complex collection of tales worth telling. Through that transformation, I discovered my own redemption. Instead of regret, there sprouted a kind of understanding, a luminous thread of human connection that binds us all, making us stronger. As I continued to careen through this labyrinth of shared stories and revelations, a little flame began to flicker within me, fueled by the connections I was forming. Each confession I read mirrored pieces of my own experience, and I started to see my younger self not as an embarrassment or a foolish girl lost in a world she didn't fully understand, but as a part of the universal human journey. I wasn't alone. Countless others had danced with the specter of anxiety and regret, had fumbled their way through adolescence like it was a minefield. I realized then that mistakes were not the end of the world but, rather, the very stepping stones that shaped us into who we were meant to be. As I navigated through the myriad of responses to my post, an unexpected message caught my eye. It was from a user, Phoenix Reborn 23, who expressed a particularly profound understanding of my situation. They too had sent explicit photos at a young age, only to find themselves grappling with not just the consequences of that decision but the enduring impact it had on their self-worth and relationships. They shared how, from that experience, they had channeled their pain into advocating for digital literacy among teens, working to help others understand the permanence of their digital footprints. Inspired, I found myself contemplating the idea of utilizing my story as a catalyst for change. Maybe, just maybe, I could transform my reflection into a lesson for others, a way of opening up dialogue and fostering understanding among young people who might navigate similar paths. The longer I pondered this new perspective, the more clarity washed over me, as if I was emerging from a fog that had long shrouded my thoughts. It was a quiet yet powerful realization. I could indeed choose to own my past without letting it define me. In that spirit, I decided to draft a blog post, recounting my experiences while threading in messages of hope, caution, and resilience. I wanted to share how vulnerability doesn't have to be shameful but can be a source of strength when used wisely. As I typed away one evening, anxiety prickled at my spine, but I pressed on, my heart racing with determination. Finally, after countless revisions and heartfelt reflections, I clicked publish. The responses poured in, brimming with appreciation and encouragement. It felt like some unseen chains were dismantling with each word I shared, liberating me from the shadows that had lingered over my youth. This newfound journey became about transformation, not destruction, and with each interaction, I felt that flame within me grow stronger. Months passed, and while my past never quite faded from my mind, it transformed into a reminder that my narrative was not one of isolation but of resilience. I continued to connect with others, exchanging stories of survival and strength, and seeing how they bore their own scars with grace. As I ventured into this new chapter of my life, I discovered that sharing my truths didn't just heal me, but it helped others to heal as well. Together, we forged an unspoken pact. It was okay to be imperfect, and in our collective vulnerability lay the seeds of hope, waiting to blossom into understanding. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, I received a message from Phoenix Reborn 23 again. This time, they had organized a small local meetup focused on sharing personal stories related to social media and its impact on young lives. They invited me to speak, to share not just about my past but about the redemption I had found. Nervous yet exhilarated, I accepted the invitation. Standing in front of that crowd, surrounded by eager faces, I recalled the girl I had once been, the girl who found herself lost in digital shadows. But as I opened my mouth to speak, the weight of that moment turned into wings, lifting me as I shared my story. The room listened intently, and as I recounted the painful lessons, I could see understanding spread amongst them like warm sunshine. In that instant, I didn't just see hopeful futures glimmering before them, I saw the threads of connection that had been woven through vulnerability, reminding us all that our pasts might hold burdens, but they also hold the shimmering possibility of growth and reconnection. And as I stepped down from the stage, the applause enveloped me, not just in approval but in acceptance of my journey, and I smiled, knowing that I had triumphed not only over my regrets but also over the darkness that once overshadowed my youth. As I left the stage, a strange calm washed over me, so different from the turmoil that had once lived in my heart. The bright lights and the thundering applause faded into a comfortable haze as I stepped backstage, where shadows mingled with muted colors and the expressions of fellow participants mirrored the kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within me. I was enveloped in a blend of nervous energy and newfound clarity, heralding a moment of connection that not long ago had felt impossible. A young woman with piercing blue eyes approached me. She was about my age, perhaps a year or two older, her face etched with lines of concern that spoke volumes. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your story reminded me that I'm not alone in this." I felt a rush of warmth at her words. I had managed to reach out and touch someone else's pain through my own confession. The conversations that followed were like droplets of rain nourishing parched ground. Each person shared their stories, their regrets, and together we were creating a tapestry of shared experience, passing strength from one to another like a warm embrace. There was Marcus, who had foolishly lashed out online, only to find out years later that those impulsive words had deeply scarred another. He spoke of his journey toward understanding that our digital footprints leave imprints on souls, not just on screens. Then there was Sarah, who had experienced betrayal by a close friend when she shared private messages. She bore her shame openly, wielding it as a gift-like armor that now shielded her from future heartaches while also allowing her to empathize with those who falter. With every confession, I wrote these moments in my heart, storing them away like precious trinkets that shimmered with potential healing. I finally found a moment of solitude, stepping outside into the crisp evening air that enveloped me like a soothing balm. The night sky twinkled overhead, stars spread like scattered thoughts across an expansive canvas, whispering promises of endless possibilities. I closed my eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over me, feeling both a sense of closure and the stirrings of a new beginning. Somewhere down that path, I hope to build a charity aimed at helping young people navigate their struggles with self-image and impulsive decisions, to hold workshops that foster candid, open dialogues. But first, I needed to process this experience, to allow its lessons to settle deep within my bones. I picked up my phone and started to type a post for that very community that had cradled my vulnerable heart. "Let me share an unexpected awakening," I wrote, pouring out the details of the evening. I felt the gentle flow of motivation guiding me, the urge to reach out and uplift others crowding every corner of my mind. Days turned into weeks, and my original post, a simple confession of regret, had blossomed into something greater. The supportive comments poured in, each one carefully weaving a new strand into our collective story. People began to share their own moments of vulnerability, conversations sparked around family, friendships, and our digital existences. I responded to each, imparting little nuggets of wisdom, interlacing my experiences with theirs, and the ripple effects were profound. Months later, when I finally launched my nonprofit organization, I stood on the stage once more. The auditorium was filled with young faces, worried yet eager. It was during that opening speech that I realized my journey had transformed. I was no longer merely a storyteller sharing cobwebbed regret. Instead, I was a fellow traveler guiding others toward understanding, the notion that while darkness can often cloud our paths, it is also the very essence of our shared humanity that lights our way. With shared laughter and the audible exhalation of those who had felt the weight of judgment, that day became a celebration of resilience, for every timid youth sitting in the audience represented a life ready to reclaim their narrative, just like I had done. And as I concluded my speech, I felt the tether that united us all, a bond kindled by simple, honest confessions, softening the sharp edges of our histories while propelling us toward luminous futures brimming with possibility and hope. When I first slid into the driver's seat of my Tesla, it felt like the dawn of a new era, not just for me but for how I viewed modern life and technology. I remember the tingling thrill of excitement, the way the soft hum of the electric engine promised a future unshackled from the noise and pollution of the past. My friends ridiculed me then, calling me a tech nerd and mocking my decision to invest in a glorified computer on wheels, but I brushed it off, intoxicated by the sleek design and the allure of sustainability. Over the months, my affinity for the car deepened. I loved the dopamine rush of the instant torque when I pressed the accelerator, the way I could summon my voice assistant to conjure up music, directions, or even a bit of levity from the mundane daily commute. However, everything changed one autumn afternoon when my routine drive home was suddenly interrupted by an unsettling event. Just as I was merging onto the highway, another driver flashed their headlights, gesturing frantically as they maneuvered around me. Confused, I peered into my rearview mirror and saw a family in an old minivan, clearly in distress. My therapy dog, Barkley, who sat beside me with his head resting lazily on my arm, seemed to sense the tension. I slowed down, pulling to the shoulder of the road, my heart racing with a combination of anxiety and curiosity. As I stepped out, the chill of the evening air hit me and I felt the weight of judgment from passing cars, all of them seemingly aware of this strange, spontaneous moment unfolding. The family rushed out of their minivan, a woman in a white blouse and a man with an ashen face, clutching a small child who appeared to be choking. In an instant, every part of me screamed to help. My heart raced as I recalled my first aid training from years ago. With an urgency that drowned my fear, I rushed toward them, my Tesla's sleek lines glimmering in the afternoon sun, a beacon of both technology and newfound responsibility. After a chaotic few minutes, punctuated by the sounds of desperation and gasps for breath, I managed to assist the child, urging them to cough and finally releasing a small object that had lodged in their throat. Relief washed over the family, whose tears now reflected gratitude rather than panic. I could feel their weight lift just as I felt my own pulse calming in the aftershocks of that dangerous moment. But as I turned to return to my car, a thought crept into my mind, knitting itself with fear. Would they see me as just some tech-savvy guy with a fancy car, not a hero, but merely a pawn of materialism? The fear lingered, reminding me of the conversations about the elitism often associated with electric vehicles. I climbed back into my Tesla, feeling not just drained but a little ashamed, questioning the world I inhabited and whether I'd ever truly been one of them, the nice people who drove simple cars, lived simple lives, and were genuinely a part of the community. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of disconnection as I pulled up online to a popular subreddit, r/AskReddit. I composed a post that translated my turmoil into words, articulating both my pride in my car and my concerns about how it could segregate me from others. After hitting post, I let the debate swirl in my mind while I lay in bed, the glow of my screen illuminating the somber shadows of my room. The responses came flooding in, many sympathized with my plight while others dismissed my feelings as trivial, mere echoes of guilt for disdainful wealth. The engagement tugged on my emotions. Some commenters shared similar experiences, while others recounted how their Teslas had become a symbol of status, painting a picture that was both vibrant and troubling. For the next few weeks, I grappled with the dichotomy between my love for the car and the vision of an isolated future it might represent. It wasn't until an opportunity arose, a local charity organizing an event for underprivileged youth where the community could discuss electric vehicles and how they could benefit everyone, that the fog of confusion began to dissipate. I offered to bring my Tesla, eager to share what drew me to it while also encouraging accessibility and understanding, hoping to bridge that gap I felt separating me from others. And there it was, as kids climbed in and excitedly pushed buttons, their faces lighting up with joy, I witnessed something revealing and profound. It wasn't about the material, it was about sharing experiences, laughter, and connection. As I left the event that evening, the smile on my face mirrored the sunset, a mix of relief and budding hope. I understood then that it wasn't the car that defined me, but the choices I made with it that could reshape my relationship with my community. As for my post on Reddit, I returned to it to share my experience and reflect on how I transformed my initial feelings of isolation into connection. The thread had blossomed with a variety of stories, some filled with heartwarming outcomes, others serving as a reminder that within the vastly sprawling universe of technology, it's our shared humanity that ultimately matters. I realized that despite my car's sleekness and the status it might convey, it was just a vehicle, both literally and metaphorically, for deeper connections, and as the day faded into night, the hum of the electric engine became a melody of promise, one that I eagerly continued to explore with an open heart and mind. As I drove home under the blanket of twilight, the blue glow of the dashboard illuminated my face, casting soft shadows that danced to the hum of the electric motor. I couldn't help but think of all the interactions I had that day, the threads weaving together a tapestry of shared experiences. The stories I had read and those I had bravely shared of my own made me realize that there was more to owning a Tesla than the sleek, cutting-edge technology or the environmental consciousness it represented. It was about the connections I was forging, each encounter igniting a spark of camaraderie that I had previously thought impossible within the isolating confines of technology. I had initially approached the announcement of the salute with a twinge of apprehension. The idea of gathering with hundreds of fellow owners and waving at strangers felt oddly intimidating. Yet, as I parked my car alongside a sea of gleaming Teslas, I felt an unexpected thrill of belonging. Strangers exchanged knowing smiles and nods, acknowledgement of a shared choice that seemed almost sacred. When we all raised our arms in a salute, I felt a swell of joy unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was as if, for just a moment, we transcended the labels we often wore in the wider world, parent, worker, neighbor, and became simply Tesla owners, a tribe bound by our decision to embrace a different future. As I navigated the quiet streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that last evening's gathering had awakened something profound within me. An urge to connect further, to not just speak about my car but to dip my toes into interpersonal relationships, the kind that thrive outside of a screen. I might have started as a lonely owner with ethereal goals of sustainability, but now I felt equipped to invite others into my life, if only for a brief coffee or a chat about shared journeys. I parked my Tesla in the garage, still reverberating with the energy of the day, and could almost hear the echoes of laughter and stories traded among friends. I picked up my phone, and for the first time, I didn't see it as an intrusive device but rather as a window to my next potential connection. Scrolling through the recent threads, I stumbled upon a post asking for recommendations for local meetups for Tesla owners. A small grin tugged at my lips, and within moments I had commented with my interest and an invitation for a casual coffee outing at a nearby cafe. My heart raced at the thought of opening my life a little wider, allowing new friendships to blossom, just like the evening's salutes had ignited camaraderie among us stranger drivers. That night, the potential of connection sparked hope within me, a realization that, perhaps, the salute was not merely a gesture but a beacon guiding me toward a community I hadn't known I craved. I happily fell asleep, dreaming not of electric highways or future innovations, but of the laughter I might soon share with newfound companions, each one fueling the promise of tomorrow's conversations. Update: a week later, I found myself sitting in that very cafe, surrounded by the soft murmur of laughter and conversations just like the ones I'd read about. Each person brought their own story. One had converted their garage into a workshop for DIY electric projects, another was an artist who used solar panels for her studio. As I laughed and shared my own experiences, I realized that each individual's narrative intertwined with mine, forming an unbreakable bond. My Tesla, it turned out, had become more than just a mode of transport. It had become the vessel that carried me toward genuine human connection. I understood now that it wasn't just about the type of car I owned, it was about the paths that unfolded from that ownership, paths leading to friendship, laughter, and the kind of warmth that can only come from moments spent in shared company. The threads we create around us, stitched together by our hopes and shared experiences, are what truly drive us forward, electric or not. And in that bubbling cafe, amid conversations that sparked and flew through the air, I felt anchored and finally at home. As I sat there, nursing my lukewarm coffee and watching the world outside the large windows of the cafe, I couldn't help but be captivated by the sight of families and friends drifting in and out, their laughter mingling with the notes of a gentle piano that seemed to fill the air with warmth. Each car that passed, along with their unique stories and journeys, reminded me of the conversations I had shared online, the kind that made me realize being a Tesla owner was less about the car itself and more about the community it unwittingly introduced me to. Turning my gaze back to the table, I noticed my phone buzz softly, drawing me back into the digital space that had sparked all this. It was a response to my thread. A fellow Tesla owner, Sarah, had shared a particularly poignant story about the emotional journey she underwent after she lost her job. She had taken solace in her daily drives, using her vehicle as a place to contemplate and process her feelings. Inspired by her bravery, I typed back, sharing my own transition from feeling isolated to finding solace in shared experiences, and how the little gatherings had transformed me from a passive commuter to an active participant in my own life. With every keystroke, I could feel the connection strengthening. It was almost palpable, like an electric charge bridging the distance between us. As the cafe lights dimmed, an inviting glow filled the room, and the conversations faded into a soft murmur around me, I suddenly thought of hosting a small gathering of my own. With a tentative excitement swelling within, I imagined a place where the stories of Tesla owners could come together, in the backyard of my own home, perhaps, surrounded by flickering fairy lights and warm fires where we could share not just our car anecdotes but also our lives. I pictured each person arriving, laughter spilling into the night, each tale weaving into a rich tapestry of our collective experiences, the feeling of community blossoming into something beautifully tangible. That evening, I left the cafe with a spark ignited in my heart, an urge to connect, communicate, and transform my newfound realizations into tangible experiences. At home, I jotted down a list of ideas, snacks, drinks, even a few fun games, or perhaps a shared playlist that could have our glowing electric engines humming along in harmony. And as the night carried on, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. The fear of vulnerability I once harbored began to dissolve, leaving behind only the thrilling possibility of what was to come. Fast forward a few weeks, as I prepared my backyard for the first gathering, I marveled at how a simple thread on Reddit had woven this entire experience together. Friends and acquaintances filled my yard, each with stories to share, shedding light on their journeys, from professional triumphs to personal challenges, all the while embracing the very same car that had once made me feel so isolated. Sitting there with a drink in hand, I looked around at familiar faces and new friends, the barriers that once made me hesitant now replaced with an understanding born from the shared experience of our rides. I recognized then that my own initial visions of yearning for admiration or status had faded into deeper connections that fed my soul, friendships that pulsated with the heartbeats of authenticity and trust. As the evening air wrapped around us, filled with the warmth of conversation, laughter, and the scent of grilled food wafting into the night, the realization struck me again. It wasn't just a sleek, silent car in the driveway but a vessel guiding me towards an incredible community of souls. In the laughter shared and stories exchanged, I learned that perhaps the journey we embark on isn't solely about the destination or the vehicle we drive, it's about where we choose to steer our lives, recognizing that the true power lies not in the electric hum of technology, but in the profound connections we cultivate with one another as we traverse this beautiful, chaotic road together. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, I found a serenity in that moment, a newfound understanding of my place in the world, and I smiled softly, eager for the adventures, both on the road and within this remarkable community, that lay ahead. It was a humid Friday afternoon when I saw the text from my sister pop up on my phone, the kind of sunlight that seeps heavily through the leaves, wrapping everything in a luminous green haze. "Can we talk about the baby shower?" It read, and even before I opened it, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Family gatherings usually put me on edge, but this one stung particularly because of my niece, Haley, who was just beginning to step into this whirlwind of adulthood and motherhood, a young woman at 22 with barely a grasp on her own dreams, let alone the burdens of parenting. My sister had always held on tightly to the idea that families should rally together for every celebration, but I wasn't about to jump into the fire this time. With 3 kids and a full-time job that drained every ounce of energy I had, I couldn't afford to take on anything else, especially something as elaborate as a baby shower. The weight of my sister's expectations loomed heavy, and yet it felt unjust, like I was the antagonist in a story I didn't agree to be part of. When I met her for coffee the next day, the savoriness of the espresso barely touched my tongue as her melancholy but hopeful gaze settled on me. "I was hoping you'd consider hosting the shower at your place," she said, almost too lightly, but I could hear the urgency beneath her words. The cafe buzzed around us, laughter and chatter filling the air, and I could almost drown in it, wishing for the world to swallow me whole rather than face this conversation. I just think it would mean a lot to Haley if we did something nice, she continued, and there it was, the guilt trip launchpad. My mind raced as I tried to visualize it, balloons in my small living room, a sea of pastel decor clashing with my casual aesthetic, and then there was the idea of Haley's friends showing up, all bubbly and full of youthful energy, while I sat, the bored executioner of this so-called celebratory event. I just don't think I can handle it, I finally uttered, my voice almost quiet against the ruckus around us. Her eyebrows knitted together, a sign of disappointment that cut deeper than I'd anticipated. But I thought we were in this together, she replied, hurt seeping through her words like water through a cracked dam. I felt a pang of guilt and uncertainty twist in my stomach, and for a moment, I wondered if maybe I was being selfish for wanting to protect my own peace. I wished I could take it back, but my loyalty to my own limits pushed me to stand my ground. We ended the conversation with an awkward hug, and as I drove home, a cloud of tension settled over my thoughts, swirling wildly as I deliberated my feelings. Shouldn't I have felt obligated to help my sister? My heart tugged at the part of me that wanted to be a good aunt, while my head screamed for self-preservation. Days turned into a week, and I found myself dodging family messages, pretending to be busy and overwhelmed while grappling with the disappointment I had left in my sister's eyes. Haley, oblivious to our frayed threads, posted on social media about the struggles of pregnancy, her joy mixed with worries, and I felt the weight of my own decisions pressing heavier against my chest. It was then that I noticed a photo of her clutching a tiny pair of baby shoes, her glowing smile juxtaposed against a backdrop that flourished with love and excitement from her friends. My heart sank a little lower. Maybe I'd misjudged the situation. Perhaps my presence at the shower was more significant than I'd thought, a file within a larger family moment that would eventually fade into nostalgia for Haley. A few days later, I reached out to my sister, my fingers hesitating over the screen, not sure what to say. I'm sorry for shutting you out. How about we do something simple? Like, a small get-together at your house? The reply came almost instantly, her joy a visible burst through the digital barrier. I'd love that. We can make it work. Having said yes to a smaller version of the event felt like a burden lifted, the knot in my chest loosening a fraction, but I was still met with trepidation about the whole ordeal. As the day approached, I helped my sister prepare rather than overstretch myself, creating an intimate environment that felt fitting for the occasion, welcoming just a handful of people. The atmosphere shifted, the gathering was infused with laughter and light conversation, a gentle pace that allowed us to relish in small moments. When I finally embraced Haley, her eyes shining as she expressed her gratitude, something softened within me. It wasn't about the big lavish events or the effort that one apparently had to offer. Instead, it was about the connections we fostered amid chaos, the memories formed beneath the laughter and subtle glances. I left the shower that evening feeling lighter, having found joy in the simplicity of family bonding, realizing I wasn't the antagonist I had assumed. As life continues to unfold, I wonder about the many roles we play and the weight of our choices, ultimately discovering that sometimes, being present is the greatest gift we can offer. Update: a couple of months after the shower, I received a text from Haley. You were the best aunt. I'll need you by my side when the baby arrives. True to the nature of life, my anxieties began to bubble beneath my skin again. I could feel the knot forming once more. However, this time, there was a different spark of excitement laced through the worries. Perhaps my growth lay not just in learning about hosting, perhaps, it was also about embracing the beautiful chaos ahead of us as a family, and that in itself felt like offering a profound love, even if chaos threatened to overtake it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and adjustments. I found myself caught somewhere between the anticipation of Haley's arrival and the heavy weight of my self-doubt. Each time I picked up my phone to message her, I hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen as I replayed our past interactions in my mind. What would she think if I voiced my fears? What if my honesty discouraged her? It was a strange dance I found myself doing, where I wanted to be supportive but feared I might come off as inadequate, as if my very presence might overshadow her joy. Every time I thought about the baby shower, the knot in my stomach tightened just a bit more. I'd spent hours Googling cute party themes and sculpting perfect Pinterest boards, wanting to give Haley the celebration she deserved, but a part of me still flinched at the thought of it. Despite the excitement in her texts, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping on shaky ground, teetering between wanting to be the best aunt I could be and worrying I might inadvertently ruin the day. One Saturday morning, after a particularly vivid dream about not showing up at her shower and Haley's disappointed face haunting me throughout the day, I decided to dive headfirst into planning mode. I rummaged through my stash of decorations tucked away in the attic, retrieving boxes of fairy lights, streamers, and balloons, remnants from a happier time when I had hosted parties more carefree. Dust motes floated in the sunlight filtering through the windows, and I took a moment to breathe in the nostalgia, memories of laughter and laughter-filled nights swirling around me. That was the turning point. I began combing through local shops for unique baby gifts, thinking of Haley's style and colors she loved. Each item I picked up felt like an offering of love, a piece of my heart wrapped up in careful thought. I surprised myself with how enjoyable the process became, my anxieties dissipating into a soft acceptance of the love we were all bound to share. The chaotic beauty of family seemed a little less overwhelming, and I started to understand that chaos isn't always destructive. Sometimes, it's what binds and strengthens our connections. The day of the shower arrived with sunlight draping the living room in golden warmth. Family and friends crowded in, filling the space with laughter and the sweet scent of baked goods. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. As Haley walked in, her glow eclipsing everything else, I couldn't help but smile. She looked radiant, and her happiness became infectious, pulling me from my anxious shell. We embraced tightly, and I whispered, "Let's just have fun." As the shower progressed, I busied myself ensuring everyone was enjoying themselves, but I kept a close eye on Haley. No longer did I feel like an imposter in the role of an aunt. Instead, I embraced every hug, every laugh shared among us. When Haley opened her gifts, her eyes sparkled brighter than I had ever seen. I watched her exude awe with each present, her gratitude pouring out as she shared stories with each person who had contributed to her journey into motherhood. That connection, that emotional exchange, was the heart of the chaos, the undercurrent that nurtured each moment we spent together. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of purple and gold, I felt a content sigh escape my lips. I had not only helped organize a memorable day, I had also rekindled my sense of belonging within the family, reconnecting me with an identity I had almost neglected. Haley caught my gaze and, with a beaming smile, whispered, "Thank you for everything." In that moment, all my previous doubts seemed to evaporate, replaced by the warmth of our bond. In the weeks that followed Haley's shower, I embraced our family's evolving dynamics. I found joy in little things, like evening phone calls filled with baby name brainstorming and sharing in her cravings. Each conversation brought me closer to that little being who hadn't even arrived yet but already held such a special place in our hearts. As Haley eventually entered motherhood, the beautiful chaos I had once feared became a familiar dance of endless affection and unexpected moments. I wasn't just her aunt anymore, I was an active participant in her life and her child's, relishing the highs and comforting her through the lows. One evening, a few months after the shower, I laid in bed reflecting on my journey, tapping my fingers gently against my pillow. The knot that had once felt so constrictive was now just a gentle reminder of my growth. Perhaps being an aunt wasn't about perfection but about presence, sharing laughter, standing in support, and never shying away from the beautifully tangled web that is family. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I left behind all doubts, embracing an open heart for whatever lovely chaos would come next, welcoming the new chapters that awaited us all. As the weeks rolled on, I found myself swept up in a rhythm, one that intertwined the mundane with the miraculous, the simple moments with the monumental milestones of Haley's pregnancy. I remember a particular afternoon when I stopped by her place to drop off some groceries. The spring sun poured in through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over everything, and I was immediately struck by how vibrant she looked. Her pregnancy was sculpting her, transforming her into an even more radiant version of the girl I once watched dream of starting her own family. We sat at her small, round table over steaming cups of herbal tea, each sip grounding me more into this new, familial role I was learning to embrace. With every chat we shared, small ripples of vulnerability merged with laughter, weaving an intricate tapestry of connection that brought us even closer. Haley, with her wide, expressive eyes, would recount her fears about motherhood, the worry lines settling more frequently on her brow as her due date approached. I listened intently, nodding in recognition of the depth of her feelings, echoing my own reflections of inadequacy that had bubbled over. During the shower planning, it made me realize how much our experiences, though different, had a common thread woven by love, expectations, and a hint of self-doubt. One particularly rainy evening, as I scrolled through social media, I came across a post from my sister announcing that they had decided to throw a welcome home party for little Charlie, Haley's baby. The planning began shortly after, turning into a flurry of messages and ideas bouncing back and forth among our family group chat. It struck me then how exhilarating it was to actually be involved, To step out of my old self-doubt and dive into this new role of active participant in our shared family rituals. I volunteered to handle decorations, recalling my knack for arranging flowers and crafting small centerpieces that felt meaningful. The excitement of collaboration sparkled in our exchanges, and for the first time, I felt a sense of belonging in the chaos. As the day of the party approached, I became wrapped up in a flurry of creativity. I remember waking up at dawn, with birds chirping outside my window, my mind already racing with ideas. I gathered twinkling fairy lights, soft pastels of streamers, and, of course, a small burst of blooms that I'd hand-picked from a nearby farmer's market. The actual day finally arrived, filled with laughter, chatter, and the lure of sweet baby scents wafting through the air. I could feel an unmistakable blend of joy and vulnerability wrapping the room in warmth. Right before the guests arrived, I caught a moment with Haley in the dimness of the dimly lit hall. We stood shoulder to shoulder, glancing at the spread we had prepared, a cozy blend of homemade pies, cupcakes, and her favorite herbal-infused punch. "I can't believe how much we've grown," she said, her voice a mixture of joy and sincere disbelief. I remembered the girl who had texted me that I was the best aunt and smiled, thinking about how far we'd come together. As laughter echoed around us, I embraced that knot of emotion in my chest, now a soft reminder of the love that had filled the air between us. At one point during the gathering, I noticed different family members darting around the room, sharing their own stories and discussing the joys and challenges of parenthood. I felt the warmth of connection radiating among us, reminding me that family existed not in the absence of messiness, but rather in the harmonious blend of our differences. This newfound understanding washed over me like a soothing balm. I was now a part of something larger, a precious mosaic pieced together by shared experiences, even the imperfect ones. And when Haley, with her beaming smile and tired, yet blissful eyes, looked at me and mouthed a silent "thank you" across the room, I knew in that moment that I had found my place. I allowed myself to bask in the joy of the moment, letting the worries of my old self flicker away like the glowing lights strung above us. There would always be more showers, birthdays, and quiet moments of chaos to share. As I departed that evening, with the scent of baby powder lingering in the air and the laughter of my family still echoing in my ears, I carried with me the knowledge that my role was simply to be there, present and loving, no matter the circumstances. Life, with its beautiful chaos, awaited us all, and I was finally ready to embrace each chapter that lay ahead. There are moments in life that shimmer with an irrepressible magic, etching themselves into the fabric of our memory, and sometimes they arrive when we least expect them. It all started on a rainy Wednesday, the kind where the sky drips gray and the world feels muted, a perfect excuse to stay in, wrapped in blankets with a book and a cup of tea. I had just broken up with Jake, a charming guy with a smile that could light up a room, but an emotional distance that left me feeling cold. I spent days mulling over our disintegration, wondering how it had gone from sweet promises whispered over candlelit dinners to awkward silences filled with things unsaid. It was in this fog of introspection that my phone buzzed. A notification from a book club app that I barely kept up with. Intrigued, I opened it to find a message from someone I had never conversed with before, a fellow member named Marcus. He had posted something simple, asking for recommendations on books about personal growth. My curiosity piqued, I tapped out a response, hinting at the layers of complexity I found in books like The Alchemist and Atomic Habits. I didn't expect the conversation to continue, but Marcus replied almost immediately, elaborating on his personal struggles and how literature had been a refuge for him during tough times. What unfolded over the next hour was an exchange unlike any I'd experienced before. He spoke openly about vulnerability and the importance of self-reflection, qualities often overlooked in our fast-paced lives. Each message felt like unwrapping a gift, revealing parts of himself wrapped in honesty and warmth. As the clock silently marked the passing hours, I felt an electric connection begin to spark through the weighted silence that had settled over my heart since Jake. I learned that Marcus was a teacher at a local school, dedicated to helping students find their passion, a fact that resonated with me deeply. It was refreshing to see someone who wanted to make a difference, not just in the classroom but as a person. He shared anecdotes of his students, the struggles they faced, and how life had shaped him into someone who believes in the power of kindness, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to. That emotional depth was intoxicating. When I reluctantly closed my phone that night, a sense of contentment washed over me, replacing the anxiety I had been harboring. Little did I know, this new friendship would take me through a powerful transformation. Over the next few weeks, we would exchange thoughts on everything from life philosophies to the best local coffee spots, finding a rhythm that felt just right. But one sunny Saturday morning, He asked if I wanted to grab coffee in person. My heart raced. This was the moment to step away from the comfort of screens and into uncharted territory. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, feeling both a rush of anticipation and a tremor of doubt. What if it was a disaster? What if the chemistry did not translate beyond the brightly lit screens? Steeling myself, I agreed, buoyed by the hope that had rooted itself so deeply in my chest. The day of our meeting dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the uncertainty brewing inside me. As I sat across from Marcus in a cozy cafe, the sunlight filtering through the large windows casting warm light across the rustic wooden tables, I felt an unexpected wave of calm. We chatted as if we were old friends, the conversation flowing effortlessly, punctuated by infectious laughter that drew curious glances from other patrons. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the person behind the messages, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of personal losses, the passion that ignited his tone when discussing his hopes for his students. It was crystal clear that this was a man who cared deeply about the world and all its intricacies. However, the moment that stood out the most was when, in the middle of a conversation about a favorite book, Marcus caught sight of a homeless man outside the cafe, holding a cardboard sign. Rather than ignore him, Marcus excused himself and walked outside, speaking to the man in hushed tones. I watched, a mix of admiration and bewilderment washing over me, as he handed him the contents of his own lunch, an exquisite Black Forest sandwich he had just ordered with extra care. He returned, a soft smile on his face, but my heart felt heavy with the realization of the depth of his character. This was someone who saw people, really saw them. The world blurred momentarily, I could barely process the warmth that flooded my chest, a mix of respect and affection that had come out of nowhere. As we continued to talk, I found myself hoping for a future intertwined with this respectful, kind-hearted man, and my mind drifted back to Jake and the many things that led to our unraveling. I learned that sometimes, it's those little moments, like sharing a meal or acknowledging someone who might usually go unnoticed, that truly illustrate a person's worth. Days turned into weeks, and we began dating, exploring local parks, attending literature events, and discovering art galleries together. Every encounter deepened my belief that I had stumbled upon something rare with Marcus, his kindness casting shadows on my previous relationships. It took time, but with openness, he encouraged me to embrace my emotions, no longer feeling the need to cloak them in pretense. I often found myself reflecting on that rainy night when we first connected, wondering if my decision to engage in a simple conversation had altered the course of my life. It made me realize that sometimes, it simply takes one person to truly understand you to change everything. And just when I thought life couldn't surprise me any longer, Marcus announced he had signed up for a local volunteering program that aimed to help feed those in need. Without hesitation, I joined him. Together, we cooked, prepared meals, and served food, with the hope that we would one day be part of the change that transcended beyond our cafe conversations. Life keeps rolling forward, the days falling like leaves from a tree, each one different yet evolving beautifully in its own right. So here I sit, grateful for vulnerability, for connection, and for a man who took a moment to care, not just for the words I shared, but for the humanity around him. Perhaps I would still be wrapped in blankets, searching for something I had lost, if not for a simple notification on a dreary day. After all, isn't that how life unfolds? You just have to be present for the magic. I find myself in a cozy corner of my living room, the soft glow of the fairy lights wrapping around the walls like a comforting embrace. I had long resigned myself to the idea of solitude, filling my evenings with stories woven from the threads of fiction and the dim light of my imagination. My mornings danced to the monotonous tune of coffee brewing and emails pinging. It was a rhythm I knew well, but one that seemed to grind on my spirit with each passing week. Until that day at the cafe, sitting across from Mark, I had thought that perhaps my story was one of quiet solitude, a life observed from the sidelines. But he disrupted that narrative effortlessly with his warmth and authenticity, like a sudden ray of sun breaking through a cloudy sky. He listened, really listened, as I shared tales of my fears and aspirations, his dark eyes reflecting a genuine curiosity that was contagious. I remember a particularly rainy afternoon, the sound of droplets tap dancing against the cafe window while I unwrapped layers of my heart. I spoke of feeling lost in my work, of wanting to venture beyond the confines of my comfort zone yet being tethered to the security of familiarity. As I finished, I caught a faint smile dancing on his lips. "You know," he said softly, "the only real boundaries we face are the ones we impose on ourselves. What if you took that leap? What if you stepped into the unknown?" His words hung in the air, and I pondered them long after the cafe closed that day, echoing through my thoughts like a persistent melody. In the weeks that followed, our meetups became a salvation from the loneliness that loomed beyond my walls. His insights were not just words, they were keys that began to unlock doors inside me. With each conversation, the branches of my worldview expanded, reaching toward experiences I had once thought were impossible. I started exploring painting, something I had tried once in high school but dismissed as a failure, the shame of that long-ago critique by a judge too stingy to appreciate the art of the moment. Inspired by Mark's encouragement, I splashed colors on canvas, my brushes dancing with joy and uncertainty, the very essence of vulnerability spilling forth in vivid hues. The act of creating became a sanctuary, a place where I found myself unmasking layers built over the years. One evening, as we chatted and sipped tea in my favorite cafe, Mark shared a turning point in his own life, a story so eerily parallel to mine yet uniquely different, rooted in struggles and triumphs that made me appreciate him even more. He had faced his own demons, and instead of running away, he dove deeper, confronting them as one confronts a storm. That night, I suddenly felt a connection stretching beyond friendship, ignited by openness and honesty, as we shared pieces of ourselves we had held tightly to for far too long. Yet, the fear of complicating this connection whispered doubts in my mind. Was it foolish to long for something more, to risk what we had built? But as Mark and I delved deeper into discussions, about dreams that loomed just out of reach, fears that felt insurmountable, and possibilities that seemed to shimmer like stars on a clear night, I realized that with him, there was a comfort in vulnerability, a safety net woven from mutual respect and shared experiences. The shift was subtle yet profound, and one day, as we savored the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee, I found my heartbeat racing. "Mark," I started, my voice steady through the tremor of anticipation, "do you think it's possible for friends to become something more?" The atmosphere thickened with tension, yet beneath it lay an unspoken promise. His gaze didn't falter, instead, it softened, and in that beautiful, breathless moment, everything shifted once again. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied, a grin breaking the seriousness of his expression. In the haze of that afternoon, I felt as if our lives were threads being stitched into a larger tapestry, each stitch vibrant and alive. And just like that, the prospects of love, connection, and belonging became a canvas we painted together. As I reflect on this journey, I realize it was about more than just a simple attraction or shared cups of coffee. It became about rediscovering myself, about exploring the concept of vulnerability in relationships. Mark taught me that sometimes, when we allow ourselves to be seen, we invite not only connection but also the chance to grow, to evolve into versions of ourselves we haven't yet met. Perhaps, in the end, it was never just about him being different, but about how, through him, I could discover the facets of my own heart that had long been shrouded in shadows. That dreary day I received that notification felt like a distant memory now, buried under layers of laughter and shared dreams. I hold on to hope, not just for what's to come, but for the beauty found in simply being present for all that life has to offer. And as I lay in the quiet of my softly lit room, I can't help but smile, knowing that the simplest of moments can unfurl the most profound transformations, leaving us to wonder just how many other connections lie waiting, just outside the door of our comfort zones, ready to blossom if only we open ourselves up to the magic. As I basked in that tranquil moment, my reflection danced in the dusk-lit window, a reminder of a time I often replayed in my mind. I thought back to the first day I met Milo, the boy who burst into my life like a sudden summer rain, refreshing and unexpected. It was a chilly Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where even the warmth of the coffee shop ticked just a bit too low on the thermostat, the scent of cinnamon laced throughout but feeling lost in the gloom. I sat hunched over my laptop, shrouded in layers of my emotional fortitude, consumed by words that refused to flow. Above the dull hum of the espresso machine, the world outside dimmed with the encroaching evening, and my thoughts tossed themselves around in chaotic knots. Just then, I heard the door swing open, and an unfamiliar face stepped in, glancing around until his gaze landed on a solitary empty table near mine. Even from a distance, I knew he was different. There was a spark of genuine curiosity in his eyes, a warm glimmer that rippled through the cafe as he settled into his chair. His hair was tousled, and his clothes looked slightly rumpled, but it was the quiet confidence in his demeanor that captured my attention. Milo pulled out a sketchbook, its pages filled with intricate doodles, and as he began to draw, the world around him seemed to fade into the background. I couldn't help but steal glances at his art, each stroke of his pencil revealing stories I yearned to know, stories that whispered to me as they met the paper. In a twist of courage buoyed by curiosity, I leaned over a little, letting my eyes devour the depth of his creativity. He noticed me, his brow raising in a friendly challenge, and unexpectedly, he grinned, that lovely, boyish grin illuminating his face. "You look like you could use a little inspiration," he said, inviting me into his enchanting world with a playful confidence. What drew me in was not just his talent but the way he didn't shy away from the connection. He took the chance to spark conversation, and before long, our shared laughter unraveled the tension that had gripped my heart. Hours slipped by unnoticed. We swapped stories, my struggles, his quiet dreams of an artist's life somewhere vibrantly outside these cafe walls, and I found myself unwinding like a tightly wound spring, revealing pieces of my heart I had nearly forgotten. It felt surreal, almost like I was stepping off a path I had walked for far too long, wandering into new territory where warmth and kindness danced around us like fireflies lighting the dusk. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, and with every sentence, a burgeoning friendship unfurled like petals kissed awake by the sun. As we parted that day, I didn't just walk back into the world outside, I crossed a threshold forged by connection, where vulnerabilities were shared and dreams no longer felt quite so distant. The weeks transformed into months, and our coffee shop became a beacon of ease amid the turbulence of life, an oasis of warmth where fears faded, replaced with dreams laid bare. With each encounter, I was met with expressions of empathy intertwined with gentle humor, and my initial hesitance melted. It was an awakening of the heart, discovering just how much healing resides in connection without pretense. The conversations meandered from our shared loves for art and music to the intricacies of life's struggles, loss, uncertainty, and the delicate dance of pursuing our passions. Each encounter felt like unwinding a thread, weaving together the fragmented pieces of our lives into a tapestry more vibrant than I ever anticipated. In this space, I uncovered what had been lurking within me, a long-buried desire for authenticity. I opened up about my fears, about how loneliness clung to me like a shadow, how I had long stopped believing I mattered. Yet, every time I shared, Milo listened more intently, his eyes reflecting empathy that brought warmth on even the coldest of days. In return, he would unfurl snippets of his own insecurities, tales of rejection as an artist, and the question of whether his passion would ever bear fruit. At this exchange, we somehow brewed a potion of mutual encouragement, our dreams blossoming within those small, safe moments where nothing felt insurmountable. And then, one fateful evening, under the soft, flickering candlelight of our usual table, Milo leaned across with a look that should have startled me, but instead felt like an inevitability. "You know," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper yet tinged with urgency, "you have this incredible light in you, and it feels as if you're ready to let it shine." My breath caught in my throat, his words pierced through me, exposing layers I had meticulously guarded. There it was, this gentle nudging that compelled me to confront my fears of inadequacy, notions of being forgotten, and the belief that perhaps it was time to step outside of the cocoon I had woven around myself. I felt emotions swirl, a blend of trepidation and elation, as he reached for my hand, an innocent gesture that connected us in a way far deeper than just two souls sharing dreams over coffee. It ignited something within me, this indescribable assurance that maybe I could contribute something beautiful to the world, that I had every right to occupy space. In that moment, as I sank deeper into his gaze, I realized I was in the midst of something so profoundly transformative, not solely because of him, but also because of my willingness to open up, to share the unfiltered truth of my heart. Even as I reminisce in my softly lit room now, with shadows dancing lightly across the walls, I know that everything shifted from that very first conversation. Milo not only encouraged me to explore my creativity but inspired a movement within me, lifting veils of doubt and replacing them with brushstrokes of hope and purpose. So here I lay, cherishing the beauty of life and love, knowing that vulnerability can lead to the most exquisite magic. Our journeys might intertwine in unexpected ways. But the truth remains, we are all just waiting for a little spark, for a connection that urges us to step fully into the light, reminding us that sometimes, the most beautiful transformations begin with a simple act of kindness.